How did the princess's cancer scare change her as a mother and a figurehead? Did Catherine change the monarchy in a way Diana could have only dreamed of? And will King William be the making or breaking of the monarchy? Do we have a fantastic episode of Palace Authorised for you? Hello and welcome to Palace Authorised. That's the show where we talk about the most explosive royal books with the extraordinary authors that write them. Today I'm joined by the extremely well-connected Russell Myers, whose book William and Catherine, The Intimate Inside Story, comes out on February 26th. Russell, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Very welcome. Now, Russell has been the royal editor of the Daily Mirror and the ITV daytime show Lorraine for the past 7 years, and he's broken a lot of royal stories along the way. I promise to be brief here so we can get on with the chat, but you really should consider subscribing to this channel if you want to be notified about wonderful interviews like this. Subscribing is free, as is the Palace Confidential newsletter, which you can sign up to by scanning the QR code that's on your screen now or by clicking the link in the description below. Right, done. Promise is a promise. Quick, lickety-split. So, Russell, welcome. Now, my first question is, was it daunting trying to document the lives of basically the two most famous people in the world?
It was exciting, and I think that this is the right time to tell William and Catherine's story. I mean, it's the first time in about a decade since their lives have been documented in such a fashion. What a time it's been over the last few years. Take your pick on any of the stories that you want to talk about. I mean, what a period for the royal family, but specifically the Prince and Princess of Wales, and how they've dealt with these huge moments. And we haven't really heard from them or, you know, how they've been feeling about these huge issues and instances that have affected their lives.
Yes, and do you think we will hear from them on that?
Well, I don't think we'll hear from them specifically. Although, interestingly, you know, just a few days ago, we've had that unprecedented statement about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and the allegations he's facing. So we are in a very interesting period where the royal family is starting to speak out a little bit more. So,
yes.
You know, and nothing's off the table, perhaps, at this moment.
I think we will be coming on to that, I'm sure. But I want to start with chapter 1, which focuses on William's childhood. Now, you wrote that Charles was determined to bring his children into a world where they would not suffer the same absence of love and affection that he had endured growing up. Now, in your opinion, was he successful? And is it even possible for a royal parent to achieve that sort of like normality of parenting?
Well, let's take the last point there, because I think that William and Catherine have achieved that. You know, family is absolutely everything to them. It's central to how they view their public role as well, because if you get the family right, you create a strong and stable environment for your children at home, then you have a much better chance of succeeding overall. Did Charles succeed? I think, of course, he will have said himself he's made mistakes in the upbringing of his children. Of course, when he was a single parent, he had an incredible situation to deal with. And you look at the relationship between him and William now. I think William's had a much bigger understanding of the pressures that he was under as a parent after having his own children. So we all make mistakes as parents, and I think the situation that Charles found himself in those early years was pretty stressful.
And I think it's not something that really any of us can relate to, trying to bring up a future King of England in a normal childhood setting. But Diana did try to keep his life as normal as possible. But then you reveal that the Queen Mother was the one who sort of subtly introduced William to his destiny over the dinner table. Tell us about this.
Yes, for sure. And it's very different to how things would work now, because you're putting a young child under such immense pressure of this is your destiny, with your life is mapped out before you even know what's going on within the royal family. And that was an incredible pressure for William. It's certainly not what he wants for his own children. And I think we've seen the sort of introduction of the Wales children into public life, and it seems very measured and on an even keel. There isn't the heir and the spare, as it were, as William and Harry were brought up. They seem to be a much stronger family unit, which I think is a huge advantage for them.
Well, speaking of the spare, you know, Harry and William, obviously they shared a very visible, deep bond as children. We all love that. I think a lot of us kind of miss that. And William forged this protective instincts that he would display for decades. But do you think that those instincts have now gone, particularly where Harry's concerned? Or
well, the fractiousness of the relationship has been well documented, and I think, when you look at the current state of play, it's difficult to see if they can ever get back to how they were. And of course, they had huge fondness between both of them. They grew up in an incredibly pressurised environment. The tragic death of their mother, that brought them ever closer. And even though there were these sort of outside forces of whether it was the Queen Mother or the courtiers preparing William for a very different destiny to his brother, there was always that close bond between them. But as I chart in the book, the fractiousness of their relationship really isn't a sort of a current phenomenon. It lasted for years through their adolescence and how they were treated differently. And I think that those subtle cracks were really exposed later on in their lives.
It's Charles, isn't it, who gets a lot of criticism for the treatment of his sons in the aftermath of Diana's death, but you've got a different take on it.
Well, I think certainly he was under incredible amount of pressure. I mean, he became a single parent, a pretty much absent father in the formative years of their life. Then the relationship between him and Diana was not only played out within the palace walls, it was played out every day within the global media, and that pressure from within really did sort of expose him to and the children into a world which we would never see in today's society. And I think that certainly William and Catherine have learned through that. And for Charles, he did his best. People I've spoken to very, very close to William say that William acknowledges that, and I think it's much more reflective for him in becoming a parent.
I love this detail. I think a lot of people wouldn't know this about Catherine. Obviously, she grew up in another world entirely from within the palace walls, little village in Bradfield. Sorry, know my English geography. But she spent 2 years in Jordan, where she was taught nursery rhymes in Arabic. Do you think that had any impact on her world outlook in becoming a royal?
Well, she was very, very young at the time, but having that sort of formative experience as a family as well, it gave the family an opportunity to really bond, because they moved over to the Middle East. There was a small expat community over there. And I think it gave Catherine an opportunity to see life outside the very sort of small and insular village upbringing that she'd been accustomed to. And when she came back, there's still a sort of longing about, what is life like outside what we're used to? And certainly seeing the global view that she does have, and I explore this in the book about how she's very, very interested in not only the Commonwealth, but also what the royal family represents abroad. I think you can chart that right back to her earliest years, for sure.
Where do you stand on the subject of, some people speculate that, her ascension to becoming the future Queen of England was strategic. She left school, went to St Andrews where she met William, but that wasn't her initial plan. And there's always been these sort of I think accusation is a strong word, but that she changed her choice of university to put herself in the proximity of William.
Well, we've seen, not only played out with rumour and speculation, but also in The Crown about how Kate Middleton pretty much forced her daughter to pursue a very different direction. Again, I reveal in the book that it was certainly her own decision. And in her gap year, she'd met another young teenager who she was out in Chile with, and discussed the possibility of going to St Andrews. And it gave her a different view of whether she wanted to go to Edinburgh. There were a lot of other kids who went to Edinburgh from her schooling. And I think, given the fact that she'd already had to move schools, she was wanting a different experience. And so it's explained in that sense that it was kind of the sort of pieces moving together that she did find herself at St Andrews and of course changed the course of history.
But and in that gap year, actually found herself running in some of the same circles as William, but they didn't actually meet until they're at university. Do you have any insight into what their early interactions were like?
Well, they were sort of...
Was it fancy at first sight?
I think there was certainly an attraction at first sight, but they were coy. There was certainly... William appreciated the fact that she wasn't overawed by him. Because imagine for William, you know, dashing young prince coming into a university full of people he didn't know. There was lots of rumours about people moving universities specifically to try and get alongside him. Stories in the papers about young women buying their wedding dresses, or certainly trying to change their course to be close to him. But it wasn't a fast relationship. It was based on mutual respect and pretty much an understanding that they wanted a new experience from life. And I think that's certainly what Catherine wanted and what William wanted by going to Scotland.
But I love what you say about their chemistry being apparent to everybody but themselves.
Oh yes, yeah.
Tell me about this.
Well, it's certainly the fact that everybody within their friendship group had told me, well, it was obvious that they were going to get together because they only had eyes for each other. They were spending a lot of time together, whether that was in the common room or going for runs. They were swimming in the North Sea. I mean, these sort of early parts of their relationship were formed with a strong friendship, and we see that, you know, demonstrated in their relationship now. And they've really used that foundation in order to pursue, you know, what a great strength and bond that they have now.
But do you have any inkling on whether or not there was a light bulb moment for them?
Well, it certainly was, because there was an instance where they'd gone to sort of one of the drinking holes at St Andrews, and they were just having a quiet drink together. And there was a moment that actually William made his move and they had their first kiss. And they thought, oh, maybe this is something more. And there had been outside forces, you know, certainly William was obviously very popular. Catherine had been labelled the fittest girl in their halls. Yeah. And you can imagine sort of the pressures that were on them. But very, very early on, their friendship was formed, and that took them on the path to exploring something more.
When do you think reality started to set in and perhaps Catherine thought, oh my goodness, I actually might be the future queen one day?
Well, I think for both of them, there was a sense of we need to protect this at all costs. And there's a moment in the book where their relationship was exposed by a mutual friend at a dinner party. And they were both pretty angry at that because they saw that as a sense of betrayal almost, that they were trying...
So a deliberate...
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was said in jest at a dinner party, but it was kind of... they were playing a game of have I never, or never... I never remember what the game's called, or never have I ever. And there was someone saying, I've never kissed two people in the same room. And William had a very short and fleeting relationship with another young woman. And they both felt very let down by that because they wanted to try and protect what they had. They didn't want the outside forces coming in. But certainly, I think, you know, they're within possibly 6 months, a year, Catherine thought, well, this is pretty serious now. And what does that mean? It's not just any relationship. Yeah. It is a commitment to saying, I will commit myself to this future. And again, we explore that in the book about how Catherine had to pretty much say to William, you know, give him an ultimatum by saying, I need a commitment from you, not necessarily of marriage, but for this relationship to work. And certainly when they did split up for that very, very brief moment, it made William think, you know, I'm not the only person who needs to think about this relationship.
Because I remember, you know, when Catherine started to be hounded by the press, we started to see similar pictures from when Diana was getting out of her little Mini, like Catherine being pursued on her way to her normal everyday job at Jigsaw. And then it was at that point that Princess Diana's former personal protection officer offered to work for her for free. And what I was interested in the book is the echo of this for William being a really sort of like bad vibe for him. How did that impact their relationship?
Well, very early on, William brought Catherine to a meeting with Prince Charles at the time, his father's chief communications secretary, and who was starting a new job and went up to Scotland to meet William. And unbeknownst to him, he just thought he was going to meet William, and he brought Catherine along. I think that tells you very, very clearly how William felt, that this is somebody I care about. This is somebody I want to try and protect as much as possible. And, you know, that wasn't really the done thing of bringing someone from the outside into the palace. But Clarence House were very, very much acting on an unofficial basis of looking after Catherine, trying to give her advice on how to deal with that external pressure.
Of course, with the backdrop of what happened to Diana.
Of course, and you're right. Those two images of Diana being pursued and Catherine being pursued in the street, flashes going off as she's trying to pull her Volkswagen Golf or Polo, whatever it was, off into the street. They're pretty distressing. And I don't think we'd see that now. You know, times have changed and they move on. But there was a flashpoint in the early parts of their relationship, and it affected her to the point of, do I really want to get involved in this?
Exactly, yeah.
And you can understand why, of course. And we've seen how, you know, Meghan was brought in and welcomed to Sandringham before they were married, which was very, very bizarre at the time. But you think, well, of course, the groundwork was laid when Catherine had been introduced to the Queen. And there's I've got a real sense of what the late Queen thought of Catherine. You know, she admired her tenacity, she admired her strength, she thought she would be a perfect ambassador for the royal family, and she totally identified the love that they both had for each other. And indeed, she invited William over to lunch at Buckingham Palace and sat him down when they'd split up, and gave him the confidence to follow his heart, essentially, by saying, you know, if you have doubts in this relationship, that's fair enough, but you've got to think of something beyond your own thoughts in this very, very pressurised institution, and you need a good partner, and that's exactly what she identified Catherine was.
And do you think the Queen gave Catherine any sage advice?
Well, she did. She not only advised her about headstrong husbands, I understand, which tells you a lot about her own relationship with...
I think she needed a headstrong husband, though, didn't she?
I think both of them, you know, were very similar.
You need a sounding board, someone grounded to tell you how it is.
And that is exactly what William and Catherine have. You know, I think that is a common misconception about the hierarchy of the monarchy. William's the one who wears the trousers, and I don't think it could be any more different, because Catherine has really evolved into someone who is not only a central force in the family. The way that they've brought their children up has been something that William's had to learn from an outside perspective and has brought into their own lives. But certainly how, you know, she is such a central figure within the monarchy. And that partnership, you know, William relies on her a lot for emotionally and spiritually. I think that's been a real experience with her cancer treatment, and they've come through it together.
Exactly, and it's so interesting, isn't it, when you think about, again, I'm thinking about that young woman being pursued on her way to her normal job, and now so many people it makes so much sense that she is, you know, such a central part of that establishment.
Well, you've got to be a pretty strong character to get through that in the first instance. You know, I think that there were a lot of issues for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex about how the media was very, very much centred in their lives. And what Catherine did very, very early on, she thought, you know, I obviously love this man, and she saw the advantages of having a profile within such an institution, but wasn't afraid to try and change it. And, you know, from the Harry and Meghan sense of wanting to change the monarchy from the inside very, very quickly, I think what we've seen with William and Catherine is a very long process of saying, well, who do we want to be as people? How do we want to be represented? And then maybe we can shape the monarchy in our vision for the modern age.
Well, it sounds like perhaps they were even having that conversation in the run-up to their wedding. And I say that in the context of Sarah Ferguson not being invited to the wedding. Do you think that was a good decision in hindsight?
Well, look at what's just happened in recent times, and I think it's very interesting that William, certainly, you talk about Andrew, that Andrew's disastrous interview with the BBC and Newsnight. William was the one to say, you know, we've got to have him out the picture. He has to be banished from not only public life, but he can't be involved in the family. He has got himself into this mess, regardless of whether he's always denied those allegations. He needs to be able to represent himself. Look at Sarah Ferguson as well. I think they always found her a damaging force around the institution. And again, I come back to this point about how do they want to be perceived? How do they want the monarchy to be perceived? If you want to try and affect change, which we often see a lot, it's often buzzwords about impact and scale within their lives, but it's more than that. It's about how do you view the future of the monarchy, because they have to protect their family's future as well.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I think most commentators would agree that William's intentions for the monarchy are pure and good, and, you know, he's interested in cause, he's interested in doing more for fewer charities and having his actions speak. And yet, in the wake of everything going on with Andrew, that crisis does look to threaten to define William's monarchy going forward.
I think so, because his view was very, very clear, very centred upon the fact that Andrew is undoubtedly a stain on the family. These allegations are so damaging and tawdry, they should be investigated by the correct authorities. This is 6 years after his Newsnight interview. We have seen a cascade of allegations, and again, he's always denied them. I think he's
denied them, and certainly the arrest is on different
different,
allegations
but again,
what he spoke about on Newsnight.
Let's talk about Andrew's personality. That is definitely light years away from how William and Catherine run their office, how they treat their staff with respect, and it certainly had no place within their view of how the institution should be run.
And then concurrent with this, they've had their own challenges. Obviously, it was 2024 in January when we had that shock announcement of Catherine's cancer diagnosis. And you've written about the difference between the King's openness about his condition and the strict privacy around Catherine, when I think probably most people would have thought that Catherine would be of the generation that would be more open. And actually, their approaches were sort of flipped from expectation, as it were.
Yeah, well, we talk about this, we're in a social media generation, aren't we, where you would expect sort of everybody to sort of warts and all. The enveloping term of cancer is useful for the royal family because we don't know what cancer they have both been individually treated for, and I think that that's useful because we will all know, unfortunately, somebody, perhaps in our own families, who will be treated for this awful disease. And the King felt very confident, and he laid the groundwork for Catherine to have that confidence to come out and deliver that public statement. And what really shocked me and stood with me, and still has done, when Catherine spoke about having to contemplate telling their 3 children. And I think everybody saw that, a young woman at 42 years old having a public role. And I tell the story about how William and Catherine were very, very centred on that moment. Not only was it very disorientating for William, his father in hospital, or being treated for cancer, both his father and wife in hospital, but also how Catherine was very, very much the sort of strong and centred, grounded one at the time. And that tells you a lot about her character. William was the one who had a lot of things going on in his mind. And they sat down with their children and they worked it out together, and I think that tells you an awful lot about their character.
Amazing. Well, in September 2024, obviously we had the fantastic news when Catherine announced that she was cancer-free. So how do you think that period of her life, that treatment and going through that awful thing that no one would wish on anybody, how do you think that's reshaped her and her role moving forward?
Well, it's had a profound effect, not only on her, but also the family. Her role as a future queen, a public figure, deciding immediately to take herself out of royal duties. There was absolutely no pressure for her to be front and centre during that time. William also took a leave of absence. But for Catherine, we've seen the Mother Nature series talking about grounding yourself in nature, slowing down. How often are we all rushing around? We are missing the things that are in front of us. Our children growing up, being on your phone. When you have a profound experience like that, and I say about how she'd really immersed herself in forest bathing, being outside in nature, slowing your senses down. And I think that's given her a much deeper appreciation, not only of her role, her sense of being, her own mortality, but also a sense of what she wants to achieve in this role, because your life can change in an instant.
It's true, isn't it? Because, Camilla has oft said she wishes she could encourage the King to slow down during his treatment, but it feels like if Catherine wants to slow down and prioritise her health, she might feel a bit more confident in doing that against the backdrop of the relentless royal duty.
Well, look, if you look at how the King has gone about his working life, Both his sons have talked about finding him asleep on the desk, pen still in hand, ink on his forehead from writing letters at 2 a.m. Both William and Catherine have made sure, they do the school run. I mean, this is a luxury. Let's not go away from this, because we're all rushing around. Some of us are parents. You'd always like more time with your children.
Breakfast club exists for a reason.
Exactly. And we don't always have that luxury. But we might get the luxury of retiring at a certain age, which is creeping up ever more. However, the royals have a job for life. The Queen was still working to her last few days. And so they need a bit more of a way of formulating what their lives look like. Catherine has taken her time to work out what the pillars of her life will be, her working life. They want to have a grounding with their children.
Yeah.
And certainly by slowing down, they're trying to get the things right that matter. And I think that should be applauded in today's society.
And a lot of people have talked about how not only Catherine, but her family, the Middletons, have helped bring a more grounded perspective to royal life. I mean, certainly we've seen, as the in-laws' grandparents, they've been a lot more hands-on with the future King George and things like that. So do you think that Catherine, in that sense, has changed the monarchy more than Diana was able to, more than she could have dreamed of?
Oh, I think undoubtedly, because the Middletons have been such a force for William as well. They gave him the opportunity to see life outside the institution. A normal family, in quotes, a family centred on friendship, respect, being able to talk about your emotions and feelings. The fact that Carol Middleton would get William up to be carving the turkey or peeling the spuds. These things
Did he know how to do those things?
I don't think he knows how to boil an egg, to be honest. And it was very funny when they were videoing Catherine when she was in hospital that first time, and Catherine would be teasing him about not cooking for the children. But the Middletons have given William a totally different perspective, and we see that in how they're bringing out their own children. Diana was still of the aristocratic set. There was certain elements that she had an appreciation for what the royal family meant in society. They're very different now. So I think Catherine has had a huge effect, and will continue to have an effect given what she's gone through the last few years.
It's really going to be fascinating. But finally, one of the chapters in the book is called The Cambridge Way.
Yes.
Now, what is that? And what hopes and what sort of potential pitfalls do you see in the Cambridge future of the monarchy? And how does it tie in with William's, what most people agree is a bit of a preoccupation of he wants to modernise and develop the firm?
Well, we certainly see him in speaking about change recently, and change for good, and not just change for change's sake to make it look like you're changing things to suit your own agenda. The Cambridge Way was formulated in the wake of the Caribbean tour in 2022. We all saw the criticism. It was played out on the global media, shaking the hands of children through a wire fence, and riding around in an open-top Land Rover. It looked like an episode of The Crown almost. Now, William and Catherine didn't want to do that. They had taken advice from on the ground from the host country. It didn't really work out. I think that there were certain issues about accepting that advice, and how they both felt very, very strongly in the aftermath of that was, we've got to trust our gut instinct here, because going to somewhere like the Caribbean, that is a place that is experiencing rapid change. There are countries talking about their own future, and both the King and William have said, we're not here to stand in anybody's way. We want to be partners rather than rulers. And again, I come back to what do you want the monarchy to look like in the future? And is it true to your values? So the Cambridge Way was formulated of, if we have something to say, we are going to say it. And if we don't believe things attached to our own values, then we are going to speak up. And so we've seen that. We've seen that in a statement about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and the damaging cascade of allegations that the royal family are facing. And I think that William and Catherine have a lot more confidence in their own voice. And certainly when change may come, we may not see coronations such as the late Queen's or even King Charles's, and we may not see William perhaps travel as much as the Commonwealth as his father did, but they will always be centred on the values that they hold dear to their personalities.
And ultimately, do you see the reign of King William as a positive for the future and the health of the monarchy?
I think very much you look at the relationship between him and his father. It is stronger than it's ever been. There is a mutual respect and understanding for what Charles went through in William's early childhood and adolescence. And I think that there is a real grounding of what this job takes. But there is also a reflective moment for William to say, you can take things from the past and you can pay respect to the traditions, but you also got to be forward thinking. You've also got to be accountable. There needs to be greater transparency. What do the younger generation care about? We've seen William taking part in documentaries. We've seen him crying, being interviewed. I mean, bearing your soul and your own well-being in that sense, going on and talking about your own mental health issues.
Yeah.
And these are really, really important. And I think that young people and the next generation find that incredibly endearing. And if you get that right, then you've got a fantastic chance of not only affecting positive change, but also, being a real positive ambassador for the future.
Well, it sounds like an absolutely fascinating and info-packed book. Don't miss it. Time does go fast.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. And Russell, it's been absolutely brilliant. A reminder to viewers that Russell's book, William and Catherine, The Intimate Inside Story, comes out on February 26th. And, well, we thought it was fabulous, so there you are. We'll leave a link to the book in the description below. And in the meantime, do remember to subscribe to this channel. It really helps us bring very special guests like Russell into our humble little studio. And don't forget to sign up to the Palace Confidential newsletter if you want to have the most exclusive royal news sent straight to your inbox. You can do that by scanning the QR code that's on your screen now, or just click the link below. Another huge thanks to Russell for joining us and to you for watching. We will see you next time. Bye for now.